Security is a broad topic that should be baked into everything we design and build as opposed to sprinkling it on the top as an afterthought. And in that light, because it's so broad, we can use some specific talking points to help focus our energies as we start implementing security in a network. And one of the acronyms that we can use to help us with that is the acronym of CIA. Let's begin. I'd like you to imagine that you and I have started a brand new company and we have some assets in our company. We have some physical facilities, a building, we have some computer equipment, and we also have some data and personnel. Probably one of our biggest assets is our people. And secondly, probably one of the biggest assets that we have is our secrets and our data and our information that we contain. So let's say that right here, this represents our data. And we absolutely want to make sure that it's secure. So what are some of the things that we'd want to do regarding that data? Well, first of all, we'd probably want to make sure that we had confidentiality. And confidentiality simply means that the authorized people who need to see that data can see it and work with it, and then those who are not authorized to see or touch or be aware of that data can't. So we can implement confidentiality on this data by doing things like encryption. We can encrypt data on a disk, and that way if the disk is stolen or lost, the unauthorized individual won't be able to see that data. Or if we're sending data across the network, we could encrypt that data, which would provide the confidentiality. Because someone who doesn't have the correct keys to decrypt that data and see it, they wouldn't be able to make sense of that data. Another thing that we'd want to ensure about this data that we're protecting is integrity. For example, if this data says 1001, we wouldn't want that data to be manipulated by an unauthorized party. For example, if an attacker or unauthorized person was able to access that data and they changed it to 2002, does that make a difference? The answer is yes. So we want to make sure we have integrity. And that includes when we send data over a network. We want to make sure that when we send the data, it doesn't get manipulated or changed in transit. So whether that data is at rest on a disk or file system or on the network moving, we want confidentiality and integrity. The other thing we want to do, and we'll fix this number here. Let's say that data is 1001. The other thing we want to do with this data is make sure that the people who need to see it, the authorized individuals, can get to that data. And that's all about availability. Because even if we have confidentiality and integrity, if we have a denial of service attack or the authorized user isn't able to get to the data when they need it, that's a problem as far as the business is concerned. Our security objectives are surrounding these three, and CIA is a great way to remember those three terms. Now, in the assessment checks, which are almost in every single nugget in this course, here's how they work. I'm going to present a set of questions and then play some music for just a few seconds and give you time to read through them and think about what the answers are based on what we learned in this nugget together. Now, if you need a little more time than the 10 seconds or so that I provide, whenever you hear the music start, just hit pause and take as much time as you'd like to read the questions and then come up with the answers. And then what we'll do is we'll review each of them together before we close out the nugget. All right, my friend, let's go through these together. Regarding CIA, confidentiality, data integrity, and availability, which one is focused on authorized users changing data? And the part that deals with the only authorized users can change or manipulate data, that would be data integrity. Question number 2, what is one popular option for implementing confidentiality? And based on what we've discussed and talked about together in this nugget, a very popular option for protecting the confidentiality of data, whether it's on a disk or it's moving over a network, is to use encryption. So we would encrypt that data using some very popular encryption algorithms such as AES and other ones that we use all the time. And the cool thing about encryption is that if somebody doesn't have the right keys, they cannot unlock and see what that data means. And that's how we can protect data either on a disk or going over a network, to make sure that only authorized individuals can see that information, which helps with the confidentiality. And then question number 3, using plain text protocols may compromise what? Now you may be saying, well, Keith, you didn't tell us explicitly in this nugget what the answer to that is. And what I'm doing here is we are reaching just a little bit together to apply some basic knowledge. So number one, what are some plain text protocols? We're going to be covering some secure protocols in detail in this course, but some plain text protocols that you're probably already familiar with would include things like Telnet, which by itself doesn't use any encryption. The data going back and forth in a Telnet session, if somebody's eavesdropping and looking at that data, they can see the characters you're typing, they can see the passwords and everything else. Another application that uses plain text protocols would be HTTP. Another protocol is FTP. All those use plain text, meaning they don't have encryption. So if we use these protocols, what are we actually impacting? Are we impacting confidentiality, data integrity, or availability? And the best answer, I think, out of all three of those would be we are affecting confidentiality. Because an eavesdropper, if they see our password being used back and forth in a Telnet session, they now have that password. Or maybe we have some confidential data that's being sent back and forth with FTP. And again, an eavesdropper who can collect all that data and see the contents of it because it's not encrypted, that now has impacted the confidentiality of that data that was being sent. So now, if someone came to us and said, what are some basic concepts we can use as we deal with and address security, we can simply say CIA for confidentiality, data integrity, and availability. Thank you for joining me in this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.